Well, good evening and welcome to the third season of the Essential Chat with Mitt. Third season. That means a lot when you get asked to come back for a third season. Want to do a few things different this year. One, we want you to put in the chat where you're from, what you do. We also want you to ask questions. You know the topic, and we want to start with some questions because oftentimes we all talk and then we say, now we have 15 minutes of questions, and we never get through our questions. And this is an essential chat, and you are our listening audience a part of the chat. So go ahead and say hello to everybody and put your name and where you're from, and also any questions that you have. And when you're asking questions, we ask that we not have amen corner. You know what amen corner is? Is where you just get on and you make a declarative statement about, yeah, that happened to me and yada, yada, yada. That you really ask us a question. We want to be put on the spot. We want to be able to have to stop. And as Schulman says, you never ever have to answer until you take a moment and you think about it. That's what social workers do. And so I am proud to be leading this chat. All the last two seasons, we always started with the name of a song for you to Google and look up. And we're not going to do it different this year. Ball of Confusion by the Temptations. That is what's been in my mind since my last chat. People everywhere, right? There's people everywhere, colors everywhere. No one wants to just treat all people with dignity and respect. And we know that our code of ethics is one that we uphold. Uh, we've had things occur where people are being boarded on planes and they're refugees. They fought to come to this country because they were living or leaving a war. Oh, I see Johnson C. Smith's in the house. They're always in the house, and I'm so appreciative of them. Um, and they're refugees. Do you know the difference between a refugee and an immigrant? There is a difference. And we find that many social workers don't know the difference, but we know that refugees are escaping war and that they come to this country wanting to be able to be a member of the United States and go through all of the procedures. And what do? We literally put them on planes and send them to places. And I know this for a fact when they went to Martha's Vineyard. They gave people some gift cards to McDonald's, knowing full well that Martha's Vineyard does not have any change whatsoever. There is no McDonald's on Martha's Vineyard. Teasing people, tempting people. But then Mother Earth and all her wisdom and power um, reminds us all of the time of why we must work together. And today, as you're watching the news of the horrific damage that was done in Florida, probably will be one of the largest hurricanes where there was loss of life. We watch people coming together. They're not asking what race, what color, who they vote for to help people who are in need of help. So that's social work. And I want you to know that that's why I went into social work. So part of this is to ask questions of the new leadership, which will be Yvonne Chase, who is now the president elect, and working with me to kind of learn and end what I am doing, and then to move into her leadership, all knowing that as we pass the baton, we're building on each other's legacy.
Okay.
Not the legacy, our own personal legacy, but the legacy of the organization. I represent over 107,000 social workers. NASW is a membership organization. We speak on behalf of the profession, but our membership is 107,000. I hope you are a member. I hope you learn this evening some reasons of why you should be a member. And I hope that one day you're sitting right here, might not be an essential chat with Mitt, but it will be something where you're serving as the president of NASW and you're taking it to the next direction. So let's kind of
Mhm.
see what these questions are, Yvonne. I see, yes, we must take a moment and really think about Floridians at this time. Um, Just 2 or 3 days before that, we also know that Puerto Rico was going through their own devastation again. They were just starting to get back, just starting to get back, and it happened again. And then we also know a couple of weeks before that, Jackson, Mississippi was experiencing flood, and all of the sudden their entire water was contaminated. People still can't drink that water. And it will take years because Flint, Michigan is still a reality. It will take years to rebuild that infrastructure. You know, down there in Florida, they have that bridge of Sanibel Island and it broke in the middle. And I said to someone, well, they're going to have to bring ferries down there because it's going to be a while before they're able to connect. And how do you get the
And
people who are on the island over to the mainland? Well, we took people to Martha's Vineyard. Now we need those ferries like they have in Martha's Vineyard to come down and assist people so that they can get back to a new lifestyle. So let's have some questions, you all. Um, there's one. Will social workers be eligible for the public service loan forgiveness? We're hearing from many social workers where my loan was forgiven, my loan was forgiven. What I tell everybody is to apply. If you don't apply, you don't have a chance. So apply and hope that your loan is forgiven. And I know someone on our board sent me an email. All my loans were forgiven. And not only were they forgiven because I was still paying in, they gave me a check for $7,000 because I had overpaid. And he said I never would have had $7,000 in my savings account, but I have because social work has been pressing this on. So we hope to get those stories out, apply. Other questions. Yvonne, I have a question for
all
you
right.
as I know Yvonne is very gracious and says to me all the time, "You're still the president," and I know that I am, and you know, I lead that way. But I do think it's important to engage new leadership in decision making because this is not about the red versus blue or blue versus red. This is about NASW. And how do we take that 107,000 members and grow it to 125 and 150? Side note, everybody, you'll see data that says there's over 750,000 social workers in the United States. If we had, I'd say 400,000 of them, do you know the political savvy we could have on the Hill?
Mhm.
Although senators and representatives love to hear that NASW has a chapter in every state and territory, they then look at our numbers. And the more those numbers grow, the more attention we get. So remember that, my listening audience. So Yvonne, what
Yeah,
what brought you? You've been involved in NASW. So I want to say Yvonne has served on many committees, has worked at NASW for numerous years, and she took on this leadership role. So tell us what your thoughts are now that you said in a couple of meetings and you see all these emails.
well, I certainly have seen you be very busy, Mitt, and accomplishing a lot. One of the things, as Mitt said, I've been involved in NASW for many years in various capacities, and I've seen the organization really evolve. And we've done some exciting things with technology, moved ahead in a national and global world. But social workers are really community builders. And I've been involved recently in looking at some of the proposed changes again in the child welfare system, and we've been proposing changes in that system for probably the last 30 years. But as I look at that and think about the role of social work in really pulling communities together and building healthy communities so that we can actually turn the tide and help families when they're not in crisis, before they get to that point. So while I want to see us work on all levels, I really want us to remember our roots, and not to let go of that piece of it. Mitt, how about you?
Yeah. Well, I've always been a change agent. I always been a change agent. One thing that I see that I didn't do is I didn't introduce two other people. So I'm going to take a minute and then I'm going to talk about my love to be a change agent. Dina Kastner is joining us, and she'll tell you a little bit more about NASW PACE and also the NASW field organizers and all the things you get for membership when you join NASW and how you can help decide. We have a woman, a senator that's running Beasley, Cheryl Beasley in North Carolina. Well, Cheryl Beasley, I know her mother, I knew her mother well. Her mother was Lou Beasley that headed up a school of social work that just preached. And so that everyone deserves. And there's her daughter who's taking on North Carolina. So we had to support Cheryl because we're reporting social work. And then we have Julia Shroyer. And I always mess up her name because it's Julie, not Julia, but I have another Julia that I'm working for. But Julie is a social worker, but she decided to develop her practice in a different way. And you're going to hear about the firm that she leads up and how she works with other people and legislators to influence social workers. And so when we talk about this world of DEI, J, and justice, I heard that new term this week and I like it. We have a social worker who's on the hill for us, who kind of understands that it's just not about trying to get a bill through, that it's about the people on the ground. So she'll tell you a little bit more about some of the legislation that has been recently passed over the last 2 years that I imagine that members don't even realize, and how important it is for you to be a field organizer and go into your community and tell everyone what what are the benefits or the deficits. So I see that Anthony McLean, but it's Angelo McLean. Our CEO is on the call. I didn't wonder. I said, Anthony, well, who is that? I didn't know Angelo had a son. But thank you, Angelo, for joining. He's the CEO of NASW and has driven NASW to where it is today. And we thank him for his leadership. And hopefully, he'll have a question and put us on the stoop. Just to see if we're on our toes. But there was a previous question that came up, and one thing why I entered NASW as the president. I was the vice president of NASW, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed listening and learning. First off, I had no idea about the breadth and the depth of NASW. But I had also served as the president of the Association of Baccalaureate Social Workers, and I had served as the president of the Council on Social Work Education and their first board chair. When we changed the role from president to board chair, I served president 2 years and board chair as one. And what I soon realized is that everyone in all of those three entities had the same vision, but everybody was working in different silos. They all were having them, some of them had the same exact programs. Let's do this, let's do that. And I realized, wow, that if they band together, we could be very powerful in social work. That we're splintered for reasons, budget and boards, but the real reality is the work that we do is in concert with one another. And I knew when I got stuck, I could call over and talk to Darla Coffey because I knew her personally. I was her board chair, her president. I also knew that I could go to BSW, to the BPD conference, and who felt on the fringes because people didn't value BSW education. And I'll be the first to say that I think BSWs are the best. And I could go and say, no, I'm going to tell your story because that's not the case. BSW students bring so much to social work. And so realizing that, wow, there is an opportunity for me, people were saying the trifecta, to kind of bring these organizations a little bit closer. Because as we learn from systems theory has it if the windows are too open, chaos occurs. If they're too closed, the organization dies. So we had to figure out how to have enough exchange with these organizations so we were to move social work forward. I'm a graduate of Howard University's master program. Organizational change is something that I love. How to keep the organization thriving so that it doesn't slip into status quo mode. So that's kind of why I decided to take that leadership position, and I think that we're doing things. You know, we're doing things that we just had a board meeting, as you well know, Yvonne, and the one area that I'm most proud of is our board because
Mhm.
they come from every community, age wise, race wise, abilities wise, and they make me think. They make me think in different ways. And that's what good leadership is about. It's not taking your leadership and telling people what to do. It is talking with the leadership to see, okay, what can we do next? Did you enjoy your first board meeting, Yvonne?
I did, definitely. And like you said, not only is it a diverse board, but it's a hard-working board. Everyone was very involved, and thanks to Mitt, we all got several assignments.
Yes. We like to work. We like to play, but it's important to work. So we hope that you will consider either being on the NASW national board, but also remember those chapters need board people. I do have to tell you, you know how much I get paid because everybody says, "Okay, Mitt, how much do you get paid?" $0. I get reimbursed for anything that I spend, but this is my commitment to the profession. How much did I get paid at BPD? Zero. How much did I get paid at CSWE? Zero. So, but when I took my pledge to be a social worker as a BSW, I took a pledge to stay in there and mold the profession in the way that it needs to go.
Mhm.
So I see that there's some good questions. Can we get some of those good
Yeah.
questions here? We keep pushing for loan forgiveness. Let me be clear about this. Any way that we can find programs, and right now we have the National Health Loan Forgiveness because we get sick too, we push for it. We have a great policy department that really looks at what social workers should be reimbursed for. I kind of would always wanted to go back to the Peace Corps days. If you're a social worker, maybe it's like the Social Work Peace Corps. How do we promote that? And although that sounds out of the box, nothing is out of the box if you really think about it. So let's make it perfectly clear in any way that we can. We push for higher wages for social workers, for loan forgiveness for social workers, for opportunities for social workers, not only in the nonprofit, but the for profit. Social work is a degree that you use wherever you go. And even if you do something different, I challenge you to always put your acronym behind BSW, MSW, because it makes people like, oh wow, you're a social worker. I have a someone that's writing in Hollywood. She's a social worker, but so I convinced her put your name out there. So always promote yourself. There is
And
more. Go ahead, Yvonne.
this was me, Mitt. I
Oh,
just
you.
wanted to mention that they're putting up on the screen the link to our loan forgiveness page, which is a great resource. We also have our policy updates page, which we did recently an update on what's been happening with student loan forgiveness. The PSLF program, or the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, is currently under a temporary waiver through the end of October. And if you're able to start the process with getting your certification from your employer, you can get you can qualify for public service loan forgiveness under some easier standards than during the regular process. So really encourage people to look into that. We do have links on our webpage on how to access the public service loan forgiveness program.
Okay. some
Can
other
I chime
questions.
in real quick
Sure,
too?
don't have to chime in. This is a chat. Go ahead.
Right.
I'm gonna drink
I
my
just
wine.
one so excited to be with you all and thrilled to have so many students and really want to reinforce the benefit of membership here. NASW has really been leading the charge on the public student loan forgiveness and has been, partnering with the Student Borrowing Protection Center and other organizations that have been really fighting to make sure that social workers are eligible and can get this forgiveness. And so it's been unbelievable the level of involvement from NASW National Office staff. It really trying to advocate for our members. And there's more work being done, but terrific. Great to put that up there because there's so
Right.
many resources available. And even one was just updated at Monday was posted, so it's really up to the minute.
Yeah, legislation is so fast moving, and obviously, telehealth is going to come back up in Florida, right? So many people are going to need support, and here we are. So we're thinking about all of these things that happen in various states are also opportunities for our legislators to listen because social workers are always there on the ground when crisis occurs, but we're there long after the news van pulls away. So that's the role of social workers. And we are in touch with our NASW chapter in Florida. They are out there on the ground helping their members, helping other people in the communities, and doing what they need to do. Water is always crucial at this time. So, other questions that you might have. Okay, I got to put my Yvonne. You want to read that one?
Sure. This is from Aja. Hope I pronounced your name correctly. Asking me if I found myself excited on taking this new position, and the answer is yes. And how can you benefit from taking this leadership opportunity? I think that at any point and at any level within NASW, there are massive benefits for taking on leadership positions. And I would urge everyone here, including the students that we have tonight, to do that as well. I think we're all lifelong learners. So, I hope I'm contributing, but I also am learning a lot in every position that I've had in NASW and continue to benefit from that. And I hope that my students are able to benefit from that as well.
Yes, and I do know that there's some listeners here that are social workers. They're not just students.
Hmm.
And you might be thinking about a career change, and it's real kind of important to know and to be mentored on how long do I stay in at this agency in this position, and what other opportunities are there. I had no idea when I got my degree that I would ever teach. I was loved Child Protective Services. I did it when received my BSW, went back when I got my MSW in Protective Service, was legal liaison for the organization, and up popped the weasel. God bless me with twins. And I knew, wow, I can't be out here when my workers are out here because they might need a court order. I got to be home with my kids. So I decided to go to Westchester University. Was only going to be there for a year or two. I started working with social workers in the community and helped them get their CEs at that time and keep them updated. And then I was asked to teach a course at the university. And then I was asked to teach another course. And then I realized I liked this. And I stayed for 32 years. So opportunities come to you. Don't be afraid to try them on. With so many opportunities in social work, how do you suggest we go about finding the opportunities that fit us best? What's that skill you learn? Risk taking, right? Um, I believe when I learn a job, Ari, and I do it over and over again, I tend to get bored. So when I'm bored, I know it's time for me to move on and to take the risk of doing something that sometimes I fear that I could not do. The one thing I know about social work, it's a small club. So people that you meet write their name down. Now you can put their name in your phone with your telephone because they change jobs too. And you begin to see other people over here, and you're like, oh, wow. And they'll talk to you about, why don't you come on over here? So, networking is a skill that we do well. Networking. Social workers are taught how to network. So, network for yourself, be an advocate for yourself. Julie, do you have anything to add to that?
I do because, one of my hidden goals for tonight that I'm going to share, I want to encourage people to think about working in policy or running for office. And I think sometimes it's actually just embracing the opportunities in front of you. When I was a BSW student, my field placement was in Michigan in the Kalamazoo County Juvenile Court. I worked with kids on moderate probation and their families. And that experience transformed me in that I found I was working with kids from troubled families that needed supports. And there wasn't the resources to give the kids and the families the supports that they needed. And it was actually cheaper to lock them up. And I was outraged by it. And I wanted to change the system, but I didn't know how. I was a junior in college and undergrad, and it was weighing on me. And that really led me to my path of working in public policy and national policy making and advocacy, because I was so upset about what I was seeing and experiencing. And saying, so sometimes it's like a trial and error. I wish I could have spent more time in the juvenile court. I did 2 years of a field placement, but so sometimes it's just being open to learning as you go. And in a million years, I didn't even know what public policy or social policy was. I found my way to it. And I just say, just be open and figure out what you care about and what you're passionate about. And then work with your colleagues and supervisors and to help mentor you, to help put you on the path.
So, Dina, I'm going to turn this part of the show over to you because this is where sometimes the path begins. I'd like you to kind of talk about the field organizers that NASW hires, also a little bit about our PACE that you monitor, and how you got to be where you are.
Sure. So I'll start with a little bit with how I got to be where I am. And then I'll talk about our field organizers and PACE, which is Political Action for Candidate Election. I did my undergraduate in social work, and I took a social policy class and realized, before taking the policy class, I knew that I wanted to help people, but wasn't really sure how I wanted to do that. And the social policy class really informed me in terms of knowing that that's how I wanted to do my career, was to work in social policy. And so then I went on to graduate school and did a joint degree in social service and law and social policy. And in there, I learned a lot about different legal processes and how to advocate and how to negotiate. And then when I finished school, I thought I would move to Washington, D.C. and get a job in federal policy. And it didn't work out for me at that time. But what I did was I moved back to Chicago, which is where I was from originally, and got invested in the social service settings there. And I worked as a director of volunteer resources and made sure that in all my jobs, I had an opportunity to do policy work, even though that wasn't my main focus of my job. So after a few years of doing volunteer management, I got a job as an organizer for a place called the Campaign for Better Healthcare, where we did healthcare organizing. And so that I did for about 3 years. And from there, I came to NASW as the senior field organizer in 2003. So I made it to doing federal policy work. So that's my story kind of briefly. And so I think that anyone who's interested in having some sort of foot in policy, you can really get those opportunities working at agencies in other types of work. So just take advantage of any opportunities that you're given at different organizations that you're in. In terms of the PACE field organizers. We have organizers in 5 states this year. They're in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And what they're doing is they are organizing social work students and social work members, NASW members, to get active in campaigns and to get out the vote. So this is a great opportunity that comes up every couple of years when we have a midterm or presidential election. So it's something that you can think about getting to know your chapter and learning about what they're doing. There's some chapters, these 5 field organizers are being paid by the national PACE, but there are some chapters that are also doing other organizing beyond that. So if we're not in your state doesn't mean that there's not something you can do for political action. You can get involved in the state chapter PACE committee and that sort of thing. So if there's any questions about the field organizer program, I'm happy to take those. And then just to let you know a little bit more about PACE, PACE is the political action arm of NASW. It's what's called a separate segregated fund attached to a membership organization. So our charge is to really help in developing relationships with members of Congress and helping that inform our policy activities and enhance our policy advocacy activities. We have a board of trustees. Right now there's 8 people on the board of trustees, and they come from across the country and from different backgrounds, and they're the ones that make decisions on endorsements of candidates. So on our PACE page, you can see who we've endorsed in this cycle and who, and we have one more meeting where they're going to be considering additional endorsements. And so one of the things that PACE allows us to do is to really have direct contact with members of Congress. Over the last couple of weeks, I've gone to a number of fundraisers for members of Congress, both in the House and the Senate. And just having an opportunity to talk to that member directly about what they've done for us or what we want them to work on has been invaluable. I've just really been able to develop relationships and kind of move things along in our policy portfolio thanks to the contributions that members make to the PACE. NASW PACE can only solicit funds from members. So if you want to have an impact at the political level through your membership your professional organization, joining NASW enables you to contribute to our political action activities.
Thank you, Dina, because that Dina has led our PACE and this unit. She knows, and as she tells you, she knows exactly what legislators are thinking because she gets out there, talks to them, kind of will suggest where they could maybe put in social work in some of their legislation and how to push the agenda for all of us. But you heard her say one important thing. We have 107,000 members. So those 107,000 members can contribute to PACE. If you'd like to contribute and you didn't check it off, you can still do so. And then you can see who the PACE trustees actually endorse. And you can recommend who they should consider to endorse. That is the power of your membership. And again, simultaneously, that is going on at the state level. So it is something that we're proud to say that we have. We're proud to say that we have field organizers out there in critical states. They're organizing, they're busy, they take very little sleep, walk through all places, all houses, knocks on doors, but it makes a difference. It really does. So those are some of the things of your membership. I hear somebody getting ready to say something. Is somebody else getting ready to say something?
So, Mitt, I have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Talk about your achievements, and I know they've been many in your tenure as president, and that you've encountered um, some things that we hope the rest of us don't encounter, like a pandemic occurring in the middle of it, a few other things. But talk about, if you would, what you see as your achievements, and then what didn't you get a chance to complete or achieve that you would like to make sure that I don't drop the ball on?
Well, I don't think that you would drop the ball. It's just NASW is so vast, and so
Hmm.
it was my intention when I came on to visit every state, to talk with all of the EDs because they drive a lot of our work, and it's completely different in one state versus another. And to keep that connection real, because we're one association. I mean, sometimes you'll say national in our EDs, but take that out of your mind. We're one association, so it's important for me to hear what's happening in the West. But in March, when I was down on the hill, and we were at what is a we were at Congress and listening to a session. We were all told to go home, and we went home because of pandemic. And so
Right.
one of the things that I'm proud of, and I'm proud of the NASW staff, both nationally and the EDs, we had to turn around and begin to deliver all of our services online. And that was not an easy thing to do. I had never been on Zoom. I didn't know anything about GoToMeeting. I didn't know anything about talking to people out there. Look at the middle of the camera. I didn't know anything about the lights, all of that stuff that you learn. One of my goals was to make sure that our membership stayed the same or went higher. That was a personal goal of mine. Now, all y'all need to join because it has went a little higher, and we can even go higher, because membership matters. When I first entered my BSW program, I wasn't even told that I had a choice. It was be a member of NASW. But membership matters. So I like the fact that we have more people, and I think I was able to connect with people better than if I had went to every state. I think I connected with more people than I ever could have connected with. So that's one of my achievements. We started these essential chats with MIT. We could have put them on where people had CEs, but we wanted to stay engaged with all social workers so that we knew the ideas of all social workers. Also, during that time of transitioning from president elect to president, I started hearing about Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And then I was home and I watched the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
Now, I'm an activist. I assalamu alaikum, salikum salam. I firmly believe in the rights of people, of all people. And I realize that social work is going to have to get engaged in this work. I have always said, and will continue to say, that the human stain in America is racism. The fact that we can't sit in a room and talk and beat out policies is a lot of racism. And because social work has chosen not to talk about it years ago and just pretend it didn't exist, we actually became complicit into controlling things and controlling people. And that all changed. That all changed. And we're working our way back now how to be liberators, how to make sure that people's voices are heard, that people who think different from myself are at the table of change. Those are the things I'm most proud of. I'm proud of our membership. Everywhere I go now and I see a social worker and I know what they're doing, I wish I had a crew that could take the pictures because social workers are doing things that that our membership is not aware of. We beat ourselves up a lot. We fail to talk about it. I ask everybody that's sitting there in the listening world, write down something good you did. It is hard. People will struggle with that because we very rarely pat ourselves on the back. And patting on ourselves on the back, I always charge people if you help one person, you've done more than the other person. And that's what social work is all about. So I will be, in June, when I'm no longer NASW member, I was at the hospital today, and I said to my husband, "Wow, I can go here and volunteer." Because I saw some things, little systems that could be improved when a person came in the door and they're all scared. Where do I go and how do I get there? And I'm like, you know what? I started off as a candy striper. I might as well come back to this arena in healthcare and help people navigate these systems. So there's always some way that we can help and we can improve the services for others. So, my board is my number one. The staff, they're dynamic. The EDs have measured up. Our CEO has helped us engage with people that we haven't engaged with through these platforms, and we will continue to grow. Now, what is it? What is our job now? Our job now is to kind of do what I wanted to do before, that public education campaign. The nonprofits and the for profits are dumping so many dollars in social work, and we can do that, right? We can do that. And we must do that, and we must use our voice and say that that's what we need to do. We need to bring all these organizations again to lower those windows and open them up so we work together. We need everybody out there to be proud of being a social worker. Don't say, "Oh, you just a social worker," or "social workers don't make much money." I'm going to tell you something right now. If you say that, you won't make much money. But if you set a goal, I'm going to make some money, you will make money. It all depends on how you navigate those systems. That's a long way around, Yvonne, but
That's all right.
Janet Webb is out there. What are some future suggestions for social workers now that can impact policies in the future? That's a wonderful question, Jana, and I thank you. I was just thinking about the policy surrounding 988. We passed this line where everybody calls, but is the infrastructure there? How are people being serviced? Um, I was like, wow, that's a really good job for meso and macro social workers to begin to look at 988. Is it getting connected? And people don't know about 988. It's the mental health line that people, instead of calling 911 when you see someone in trouble or attempting to, or is talking about suicide, you call 988. And they announced it and they came up with great system with that number. But no, I think social work needs to evaluate is the system behind it to get people to the services. So that's something that I would love to do if I was starting over. How about you, Yvonne?
Well, I was thinking about her question and what do you do now to really affect policies in the future? And I would suggest for students and for others working in the field that you really look at getting involved with your legislature, whether it's on a state level or a national level in Congress. Um, like Mitt, I'm also a graduate of the MSW program at Howard. And one of the best courses I ever took was a course on group dynamics. And I used that many times sitting in budget hearings for the legislature when I knew that the party that was in control of the committee that I was about to testify in front of was probably not going to like what I was going to say. So I had to think of another way to really move the policies that the administration needed through that process. So I think that, and Julie mentioned it as well, and Dina, how important it is to really get in there and understand the inner workings of those kinds of things. And Mitt's been, working on the whole voting issue.
Yeah.
The vote
Yep.
counts.
And
It
I
counts.
want to I want to give credit to Terry Mazarahi, Darlene Bailey, and Mimi Abramovitz for all the work that they've done. Social voting is social work. I encourage you to go to their website and learn about some of the things that you can participate in. As I said, when I first came on, the 2020 elections were here, and it was either reelect a president or bring a new president. And so I felt it was important for our members to really understand what their vote means. And so we want to spend the balance of the rest of this conversation talking to you about voting. You know, our democracy, I believe, I will say that I'm going to say I'm biased. I believe that our democracy, and I've been saying this, uh, is at the precipice. Either we're going to save our democracy or our democracy will be no longer. We know that we are just a couple of seats away from uh, going back and really saying, I know in my state, the governor who is trying to run is saying that he's going to go back and purge all the votes of Pennsylvanians, and that President Biden didn't win the state of Pennsylvania. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of all these arguments. That's not what I pay my senators and my representatives to do. I pay them to come to Washington using my tax dollars to represent the people and to pass legislation that will improve the conditions for all people. So I don't want to get back to all of this hate because I don't believe that. And I see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and I see Afghani and Iranian women being very bold right now. I mean, I never thought that I would see Iranian women take off and burn and say that women have to have their vote. I never thought that I would see the reversal of Roe versus Wade. I never thought that would
Yeah.
happen. And then at a conference, at the Dobbs decision came out. And then I watched the state of Kansas say, oh, no, you're not going to do that to us.
Mhm.
So I know it is the people. It is the people that have to make this difficult decision. And so I'm going to spend my next 2 months or 3 months talking about the vote. Social workers cannot allow the vote to be buried. We cannot allow that to happen. We can't keep saying thoughts and prayers. We can't keep saying, well, what do I need to do? We have to lead. We have to take action. We have to go in the streets and knock on doors like those field organizers are doing that we hired. We have to address, no, 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 that's not correct. This is true. Let's kind of go back and find the facts. That's not true. So I want to talk with Julie, and have her kind of talk to you about, do you know over the last 2 years that more legislation has been passed that helps individuals that we work with? Did you know that? I mean, you talk about loan forgiveness, that happened. Now they're trying to take it away, but it happened. So, Julie, can you kind of help educate our listening audience and get them invigorated, not to just say, oh, well, I'm going to go vote, but that they bring other people to the ballot, that they talk to their mother, their partners, that they go down the street, when I was growing up, my father and mother used to have these little coffee clatches where they would invite the neighbors in and have cake and coffee. And we would sit and we talk about the issues that were going to affect us in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. Well, it's time to do that again. So, Julie.
Thank you. And this is just such an important time. We're less than, just a little over 40 days until election day. And, we have a United States Senate that's evenly divided, 50-50. There has been unbelievable success in the last few years. We're currently in the 117th Congress, which is a 2-year session for the years 2021 and 2022. And, so much incredible work has been done. One of the things that we wanted to make sure you're all aware of is that NASW put out in the beginning of this Congress in 2021 a blueprint, sort of our social policy goals for this Congress. And there were 21 goals. Mitt, you said that our work is vast. It's unbelievable, the breadth of the issues that we're working on, for our clients and for all Americans. And really, of those 21 policy goals, we've advanced or completed almost 14 where we've had real traction, which is truly unbelievable and a tribute to the leadership of NASW, our EDs, our chapters, our staff, and our members, because getting engaged. And I know some of you had asked, how can you get involved? And NASW regularly puts out advocacy alerts, letting you know when there's a timely issue that we need your help and we need your voice. And they provide you with some background and suggested talking points, but also wanting you to put your own personalized voice in there so that you can talk. What your elected officials want to hear about is what's at home. And I was thinking about that, Yvonne, when you were talking, it reminded me of the former House Speaker Tip O'Neill from Massachusetts. His famous quote was, "All politics are local." So when you think about how do you get involved in policy, it truly starts at home. What's happening in your neighborhood, in your community, in your school. I got my master's in social work at the University of Michigan. And when I was listening to Yvonne speak, she reminded me that one of my first, real stands that we took in the school, at that time, there was no such thing as Martin Luther King's birthday. There was no such thing as a holiday. And the student body at the University of Michigan decided to protest that. And we did a walkout and we refused to go to school. We just said classes should be canceled. This day should be honored. And now, it's a federal holiday. So it's amazing what can happen when we come together and fight for common goals. There's been so much legislation that it's hard to know where to begin. You could just look at yesterday alone. The White House had a conference on hunger, nutrition, and health. I think this is the first time they've had a summit looking at these issues in our country in nearly 50 years on how to combat hunger. There's all kinds of new funding that's going to be made available to expand free school meals to over 9 million children over the next decade, and to try to help Americans access more nutritious foods. This is a phenomenal endeavor to do more education and reduce food waste. Most recently, in August, the Inflation Reduction Act was signed into law on August 16th of 2022. There were some notable healthcare provisions that were included in this bill. It would, for the first time, allow the Secretary of Health and Human Services to negotiate fair prices for certain drugs within the Medicare program. This is huge. There's also, there was included in there a cap on insulin costs starting next year. There'd be a monthly cap initially of $35 on the cost of insulin furnished under the Medicare program. This is going to have a huge impact for seniors. There were also some tax credits that were extended through the bill that were set to expire and expand those for individuals and families with incomes between 100% and 400% of the federal poverty level. And so there really is progress being made. I've been living and working in Washington, D.C., working in mental health and substance use disorder policy my whole career. And I've never seen more attention in the last few years than the attention that's been shown on these issues. And, sadly, the pandemic has just exacerbated the need and for services. But the administration put in telehealth waivers that during this public health emergency that are looking at being made permanent so that we can allow more access to healthcare, but particularly mental health or behavioral health care, which has been phenomenal. Just on the social justice agenda alone, and I know that Mitt has really dedicated much of her presidency to voting rights. And, legislation has been passed in the House. We're desperately trying to get the Senate to take it up. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act that would protect votes from race-based discrimination and set minimum standards so that all voters can have access to free and fair elections. This is something that we still have to push to see through. And this election is going to demonstrate that it's never been more important. We've had the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act had passed the House in the spring of 2021. There has been environmental justice legislation, immigration, economic justice. Even just in the last week, last Thursday, the Senate Finance Committee, one of the key healthcare committees in the Congress, released a draft of workforce-related legislation. And this was a task force that was chaired by bipartisan senators in the Senate. Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, a social worker. You got to love that. We have 5 elected leaders in the United States Congress that are social workers, and we need more. Along with her colleague, Senator Daines of Montana. And in this proposal that's now in draft form, there's been a bill that NASW has been advocating for years on the Medicare program to increase reimbursement for clinical social workers and to also allow social workers to provide services and be reimbursed through skilled nursing facilities and also through health behavioral and assessment program through Medicare. 2 of these 3 provisions in this access bill were included in the Senate workforce draft. And it's taken years to make these things happen, but we're making progress. And so it's in large measure, it's such a critical time. There have been so many victories along the way. There's so many more to come, and that's why it's just such a thrill to be with you tonight and to hope that you'll go to the NSW website, go to the advocacy page, and look at all the different issues, the breadth of issues that we've been working on. Workplace violence prevention. Dr. McLean, the CEO of NASW, testified before Capitol Hill about the dangers for social workers in certain workplaces, and other colleagues of ours, and actually helped get legislation that's been passed in the House of Representatives and is now pending in the Senate. So I could go on, and I don't want to dominate the time. I want to open it up for questions, but it's just, there is so much happening, and we need to be in so many places, and we need your help in order to push some of this through and help educate lawmakers at all levels. I didn't get to, there's so much more, but we're doing a ton in the LGBTQ community. We're also doing a ton and reproductive rights have never been more important. And I think Mitt talked about, what happened in Kansas and other states. And so if it's not getting done at the federal level, it's also, the state is another place where we can make things happen. And so both are important to be involved.
So I see that Sarah has a question, and we'll take that, and then I'm going to go back to Sierra Carter, because that was my name, Carter. I'm a Carter, so I always call it any Carter I see. But Sarah Johnson, what about social policy grasp your attention?
As a social worker and learning about our field and our practice and how to take care of our clients, I guess what I realized is that you can work in an individual client setting, an organization, but there is that macro perspective where you can actually make a difference by working at the national level or the state level. When I first came to Washington, there was such a stigma towards mental health and mental illness. And, we didn't have equitable coverage in healthcare. And one of the things that I got to work on was mental health parity legislation. And there was a question earlier, and I think that might have been the Sierra one, because this is where I was going to answer. I think it was about if you ever had oh, that was on the voting. Well, no, yes, when you faced a dilemma in social policy, that was it. That was, I guess I got the second part, Sierra, is that when we worked on the original Mental Health Parity Act of 1996, at that time, we wanted to make parity in health insurance coverage for both mental health and substance use disorders. We knew that both needed to be included, and we didn't have the will there within the Congress. There was a concern about what the cost would be, and even SUD treatment at that time wasn't as well understood and accepted. And so a strategic decision was made that we got to start somewhere, and let's at least get mental health parity done. And it wasn't until several years later that they went on to expand and do both. And that was, a dilemma. And I guess it's kind of in Mitt and Yvonne, I know you've had these experiences, and Dina can speak to it too. Do you want the whole loaf, or do you take half a loaf? And can you go back later? And, to me, you got to take those opportunities when they come. You want it all, but sometimes you got to it's incremental. And that's a perfect example of how we started with just mental health coverage, getting equitable, and we came back later and got full mental health and SUD parity reform.
Great response. Sierra, that was a great question as well. I always try to use my line of demarcation. Is it an ethical dilemma or is it a dilemma? Right? And there is a difference. Does it violate our ethics? If it violates our ethics, then I can't support it. But if it is a dilemma where they only want to give us a small portion, I would rather have that small portion than nothing. And this kind of all goes back to civic classes, where I firmly believe that civic classes are kind of essential, because when you understand how long it takes a bill to become a law, you realize that it's not going to happen. You're not going to come up with an idea, go down and talk to some representatives. They whip up some language and it gets passed in the House and then sent to the Senate. It very rarely happens that way. The only time that it sometimes happens is when there's a national catastrophe. And we saw that didn't even happen with gun control. National catastrophes happen, but we didn't get to where we need to be. And that's the thing that you learn in social work that I think is that you don't learn in any other profession, is those value clarification. How do I do what is best for the people that I serve? This is not about me, Mitt Joyner, right? It's not about me winning. It's how to push the envelope. So Sierra, that was really a good question. And you asked a question about how to get young people involved. Well, I know that there was a young man in Florida that decided to take Val Deming's seat, and he will be the youngest person in Congress come January, because he won. And everybody didn't think that he could win because he was so young and he was taking Val Denning's space, and there was other people that were going. But he decided, no, I'm going to go out here. The largest voting bloc is young people. So if you can relate to young people, you have a really good chance about getting elected. If you know in your area who the dominant party is, if you know how to shake hands and talk with people, you have an opportunity to do something that you didn't think that could be done. And I love seeing this new energy coming in, because we do have a lot of people that have been there for long periods of time and who are deciding not to run for office. And so young people, build your cohorts, go out. How did you get elected social work club president? Kind of think about, how did you get elected to be the Girl Scout? You probably have used your skills over and over again about how to use your persuasive communication skills to help bring people along to a vision that people would love to embrace. And so Sierra Carter, I can't wait to see what you're running for because I think that you might have that little twinkle in your eye. The fact about this election that we do have a split. We're supposed to have a split Senate, but it doesn't always happen that way. So we do know that if we really want progress to happen, we need 52. Right? We do know that we can't afford to play around with the politics anymore. That we have to drive the legislation. So we do know that there's. I just talked to you about North Carolina. I'll talk to you about Pennsylvania. John Featherman going up is, to take that was a Republican that was sitting in that seat. And if we could have two senators um, who believe in the values of Pennsylvanians, I think we could very much be very successful. Pennsylvania is very unique. You have your major cities, and then you have your corridor. We sit next to West Virginia. We sit next to Ohio. Um, but the one thing that I say that any candidate has to think about is what are the needs of people who live in rural communities, and be able to address that. Because if we only address what's going to happen in cities or what's going to happen here, we have to be able to talk to the person that has no transportation. How do I mean, here, I live here, but a few miles down the road, if you live in Oxford or any of those places, there is no transportation. So you might have a really good food bank that distributes food, but you don't have anywhere to get there. So there are some of the problems that I think that you as young people can go out and use your problem solving skills to figure out. What other questions do we have back there, group? Somebody want to take that one from April?
That's a great question, April.
Mhm.
And you would be surprised that when you're trying to build relationships with your elected officials, it's really trying to find common ground and what you have in common, whether it's a place in your community, where it's a place that you shop, where it's that you went to the same school, any way that you can find a connection. um, you have to be open and willing to try to find common ground. And it does happen where, through some education, sometimes you can get members to understand your point of view, particularly if they see the impact on their community. And I have been astounded. I really work what we say in Washington across the aisle in a bipartisan fashion because I believe that all of our issues that we work on with NASW are the right policies that everyone should agree with and believe in. And so I really don't walk away from any office and try to build those relationships. And particularly when you're a constituent and you live in that district or that state of that elected official, they should be willing to hear you out. And you just never know. Stranger things have happened. And so it requires using your social work skills and being open to other points of view, and also sometimes agreeing to disagree. Um, but keep pushing the envelope and keep trying to find a way to educate them about why you're so passionate about an issue and why you think a policy is right. And sometimes you have to agree to disagree, but maybe you can find another way to work together. So I hope that's helpful.
And some tricks I'll add into that is I know everybody likes to come to Washington and go on the Hill and meet your senator on the Hill, but if you can meet them in their home office, you have a better chance of sitting down talking with them. And then I will also say never, ever skip over the staffer, because you can talk with someone, but it's the staffer that's going to remember you and try to figure out, oh, okay, I remember social work was here. I used to take to Senator Toomey and Casey Hershey bars. Hershey bars from Pennsylvania, just to let them know, person's here from Pennsylvania, going to give you a Hershey bar. Didn't do anything, but it made them remember, right? And then I often say, as all social workers do, before you meet anyone, study. What are some of the things? What is their personal life that's out there on the internet? If you know someone has a child that is autistic, how do you bring up the fact that social work works with autistic children? You engage that person, and all they may be not from your party, they want to hear more. How do you do that? So the skills that you have and you learned in the classroom, please apply them. I heard Yvonne say, her favorite class. We all have those skills that sometimes we sit down and we write notes and we forget how to use. But you never ever go visit anybody unless you do your homework. Don't ask them questions you already know the answer of, and begin to make that connection so that they can look up and say, aha, you may agree to disagree, but they will remember that there was a social worker in that office. And I think just finding out all the offices, I visit offices around here in Westchester because going on the Hill has become complicated due to COVID. And I always find the staffers, because I stop by so much and I must be bugging them, will say, okay, they'll be here on this day. So those are some of the little tips I'll give you. The rest of you have some tips?
Well,
I
I
was
would just
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Yvonne.
I would just reinforce what you said, Mitt, about don't skip over the staff. Because I found the same thing in working with the legislature here in my state, that it was the staff that was actually going to help revise and refashion a bill, so that we could get the votes on both sides of the aisle.
Mhm.
I was going to just remind you to follow them on social media. You know,
Mm.
follow them on Twitter, follow them on Instagram, or whatever format you use. And my goodness, if you see them do something and take a vote that you like, thank them.
Mhm.
I've worked for members of Congress, and one of the things that they're astounded by is how often they do the right thing, and you've asked them to do it, but you don't go back and say, thank you. You made a difference. You made a difference in my life or my community and the country. And so um, I think it's very helpful to and then as Mitt said, do your homework. They all have websites. They put out press releases. They have a list of the bills that they're sponsoring. Know what they're interested in, and find a way to utilize that to find a connection. And it's all about building relationships and being open to finding a common ground with someone that maybe you thought you never would have.
And Julia, you
Yeah.
reminded me, my grandmother would always say, send a thank you note or send a thank you email. It's just those
Mhm.
little things make people, because not everybody does that these days. So you're going to be noticed for the thank you. Now, I enjoy chatting with you all, but I need you to put in the chat, what are you going to do for these midterm elections? I don't want you to put in the chat, I'm going to vote. I need you to put, going into the voting is social work, list out 3 things that you can do, and that you can do, that you are going to do. Because if all of us list 3 things that we're going to do, we've made an impact. So, what are some things in your community, in your state? Because Julie also and Dina is talking about, all of these field organizers. Remember, who protects the ballot is going to be critical in 2022. So if you elect someone that is saying already, we're not going to count ballots, I'm just going to put whatever you can't vote for that person. We can't move our democracy to that area where votes are thrown out. So what are you going to do? Let's get some things in here and let's advocate. Okay, wait a minute. What does this person say? To create more voting traction. Okay, Kirsten Hyde. Let me see. What does that mean? How are you going to get that traction in advocacy? Give you time to respond to, break it down for me. What are some other things that people are going to do? because advocacy is critical. Okay, Carissa, hang flyers, spread awareness on social media, have conversations with my family and my peers. That's great. Write postcards, do voter protection on election day. That's critical. Let NASW Iowa members know who we endorse. Okay, that's important that we know who we are endorsing. So I want you to go to the website, but then spread the word. Phone bank. Yes, I do a lot of phone banking. It's not fun when people hang up on you, but it's okay because some of them listen. Canvas, send more emails. Now I tend to take a little bit of my pocket change. I don't roll it out too early because I get too many emails. And I'll start flooding with $5 here and $5 there and $5 there. Because every dollar matters. And I know this year in Pennsylvania, I am a Pennsylvanian. I cannot go to where some Pennsylvanians want to take us. So it's important. But if you can invest, because I know a lot of people live on an income that won't allow them to do that, ask your mom as a birthday present. Holidays are coming. Let's give up something. So here's something else. What is this one? Yard signs. Yes. Advocacy groups. Excellent. I love what's going to be happening out there in the social work world.
And Mid, I would like to add, in terms of giving money to candidates, it's great if you can give directly to candidates, but you can also, as a member of NASW, give to PACE, and then that money gets pooled together and has even more impact, because we can then, give contributions, going to events for candidates, it's $1,000 or $2,500. And so by having a lot of people really pulling together and putting that money jointly, it can really have an impact.
Right. We need to have some parties on midterm night.
Yep.
Right. We need to celebrate together. All right. The meaning of being vocal and communicating with the local community. Thank you so much, because that is exactly what advocacy means. Working with the local community and sharing information concerning voting on your social media accounts. And it's important that we ourselves make sure that we do the due diligence of making sure that we spread facts, not false narratives. And sometimes you'll see something and you're like, oh my God, did they do that? And you want to spread it. Stop. Go find the real source, because we do know that there are people out there that put up things, use people's pictures, faces, and they want you to make those mistakes. So Wikipedia is not a good thing in social work. It is not a good thing in policy either. Okay. Dr. Crocker said Senator Warnock to be reelected. This is a really interesting. This is an interesting This is interesting because, all right, I'm going to go there. This is pitting two people of color against each other. One who was in sports and who, when he was playing football, did great things for the community. So, how do you, again, get through these dilemmas? You go back and you listen to their platform positions, because this is not about football. This is about saying that every woman will not be allowed to make decisions about her body. This is about saying to people in Georgia, no one can bring you water or food. This is about the basic thing that we fought for in the 60s and the 70s. If any of you kind of looked at the civil rights years and understood the busing project, where people would organize on buses and come down south to register people to vote, they didn't care who they voted for. They cared that that individual didn't get an algebra test. They cared that everybody was treated equally. And that's what our role has to be. So I ask us to look at Georgia It's going to be very, very interesting. Um, it is playing that human stain that I talked about at the very beginning and watching people be manipulated about it. So I've had some people who kind of, I mean, I'm a sports fanatic. I love my Eagles, who are right now 3-0. And but I would not right now vote for Jalen Hurt to be our senator. So you have to study the platform, and that's what's important. And if you come out of that where the people resonate with you, then it's okay to say vote for this person. But so many of the people have not done their homework. I was just telling the board recently they had this question on, did you know that Queen Elizabeth put her dogs in the coffin? And people got on television and said, "Oh yeah, that was horrible. Where did you see that?" "Oh, I saw that on social media." "Did you see where Kate and them got into a fight?" "Yeah, I saw that. That was horrible." "Where did you see it?" "On social media." People go to TikTok. Now, I released myself on TikTok. I had somebody that convinced me I would do that. But we do know that sometimes TikTok does not put up the truth. And so it is important that not only TikTok, but Twitter, LinkedIn, all of them can be tainted by whoever puts up that information. So if you're a social worker and working in the community, your job and responsibility is to bring accurate information and then allow a person to make the best choice for themselves. I find that the League of Women Voters, because it's nonpartisan, is the best place to start to get information. Is there anybody else that has any other places that they would look towards finding some information?
One website that's really helpful for me is called Ballotpedia. It has just basic information about the campaigns, and it links to candidate questionnaires for the candidates in your district, and they do it across the country. It's really a great resource.
So we always say when we do this that we'll need to try to stretch this out, but I'm going to ask everybody to do a summary because it's almost time to say good night. And I hope you like this format because we were doing it in the afternoon, but someone convinced us to come late at night on the East Coast. Okay, so I'm going to ask Dina to give some summary comments.
Thank you. So I guess my summary is just that this is a critical election. All elections are critical, but this is definitely a critical election. We're looking at individuals who want to save our democracy and some individuals who want to tear it down. And we have a choice in terms of who we support. You can definitely get involved with NASW and see who we're supporting. It doesn't mean you have to vote for that person, but you can see where we're putting our resources and our talents. We're very excited to have field organizers in the 5 states that I mentioned before, which are Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Just think of ways that you can get engaged, both during the elections and then after. It's a year-long process because you want to be involved in the elections, but then you want to be involved once people are elected and helping make sure that they do the right things. So that would be my summation.
Okay. Julie?
I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be with all of you this evening. It's truly an honor for me to get to work with NASW and represent your interests in Washington. And it's just, I really want to echo what Dina said about what's at stake in this election and how essential it is that you stand up and be heard and participate in the process. And it's not just this election, but it's in everyday life and all that you do in everyday settings. It's how we interact with our fellow humans and acknowledge people and meet them where they are and think about how you can set an example and how you can improve your workplace, your school, your classroom environment, whatever it may be. I just want to say how inspired I have been by Mitt, Yvonne, and Dina, but also the wonderful comments and the wonderful questions and engagement. It really gives me hope for the future. And I just urge you to stay educated and stay involved and realize that your voice matters and you can make a difference.
Thank you. Yvonne.
Well, I agree with definitely with the comments that have already been said. I guess my message would be remember we have the power to make a difference. And, as Mitt said when we started this evening, there are over 700,000 social workers in the United States. And she also mentioned how really we're in things are in a balance. They can go too far this way or too far this way. It's important that we act and and that we show that um, ethical decisions can be made by the majority.
Thank you. I too want to thank Dina, Julie, and Yvonne for joining this essential chat this evening. Membership matters. It always has and it always will. And so I ask you to really think about being a member of NASW. I also direct you to votingassocialwork.org so that you can learn how to get more involved in the midterm elections. The midterm elections will set the stage for the 2024 election. There's no doubt about it. Some other things that NASW is doing is we have a Pioneer Luncheon that will be occurring on October the 15th, where we will be inducting 37 more change agents who made a difference. And I hope that you would join us if you're in the DC area, but at least go to the website and learn about that people that the people that we're honoring. Also, learn a little bit more about the NASW pioneers. Julia mentioned Whitney Young. Whitney Young sat in the same seat that I sat in. He was president of NASW, but he also worked with President Johnson, President Kennedy, and President Nixon. He was one of the big five in helping to organize the March on Washington. He was one that pushed for the Voting Rights Act. He was a social worker. And every time I go into my office and NASW, I see his face. And I know that we must continue his legacy because Whitney Young did that at a time where they were hanging and lynching people. So if he can do it, so can we. Also, I want you to know that on November the 2nd to the 3rd, NASW is hosting resiliency in COVID. So you might want to go on our website and look at that and think about joining that webinar. I know on October 13th, I will be talking with the APA and the NANA and social work about mental health and how we can work across disciplines. Again, social work is vast and it is deep. Don't ever think that there's a day that we're not working for you and on behalf of you. The final thing I say about voting is remember to check and make sure you're registered to vote. There have been some things going on in states where you think because you voted the last time, you could just roll up there and vote again. Everybody you talk to, add that to the list of things that I ask you to write down. Make sure that everyone checks and make sure that they are allowed to vote and what they need to bring if they're going to vote in a particular area, because that has changed. Next month, we're going to bring Julia's partner on. And I always have fun with Alan Wheat because he is a pollster. He gives us the polls. And sometimes I just want to say, stop it. I don't want to hear anymore. But the one thing we need to know is where are the polls in these 5 states in the latter part of October? Why? Because we can change it. When you hear that polling is 2, 3, 4 points out, there's an ability to influence, and you have the ability to put up more signs and be out there. So make sure that Alan's going to come on, and what you're going to hear is like, "Oh my God, bring Julie back," because Alan's going to tell us the truth, but he's always telling us the truth to motivate us to do what is necessary. The third series that we're going to have is going to be after the election. It is whoever gets into office, what's social work's agenda going to be? And that is going to be, again, we're going to ask Yvonne to come back on that one because that's going to be critical. Whoever gets elected, we're going to be setting up for 2024, but there's still work to be done in 2022 to 2024. And where can we get the traction, and what can we get pushed? You see a lot of bipartisan bills right now. We see the one where McConnell has just said that he would support so that we would never have a January 6th. Will that get voted before or after? And so politics are in those decisions as well. I want to thank you for spending time with us this evening. Thank our producers, Alea, Greg, and Carissa, for being behind the scenes. Without them, we could not do this. And I want to thank you for taking the time. And I know that you're going to go out and spread the word. And when you do one of those checkoffs, email me, president@socialworkers.org. Let me know that you did the action that you stated you're going to do. Let's hold ourselves accountable, because if we do everything that we possibly can and we can't bring victory, we can kind of look at what did we fall down on. But right now, I'm a social worker. I believe in hope, I believe in change, and I believe we can do this. So thank you all, and go enjoy your evening. If you're on the East Coast, if you're in another time zone, it's time for maybe your dinner. And for Yvonne, who's all the way out there in Alaska, she's just finishing her day. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye.